He thought he was just helping a stranded old man change a flat tire in the pouring rain. He had no idea that simple act of decency was a test, and that by passing it, he had just unknowingly placed his life under the protection of the city's most powerful and most feared Mafia Capo. The rain didn't just fall, it attacked. It hammered the cracked pavement of the Iron Triangle, a forgotten neighborhood of brick and rust that sagged under the weight of a city that had long since moved on. For Malik, every drop sounded like a ticking clock. Another second he was late, another moment his grandmother was alone. He was 17, but he carried the worries of a man twice his age in the slump of his shoulders. His jacket, thin and worn, was useless against the deluge. He pedaled his bike harder, the worn chain groaning in protest, his mind on the pharmacy receipt folded in his pocket, a slip of paper that felt heavier than a tombstone. That's when he saw it. A car, long and black and gleaming like a wet stone, sat silently on the shoulder of the road. It was a Lincoln, an old one, the kind you didn't see anymore, a ghost from another era. And beside it, an old man in a tailored coat stood struggling with a lug wrench, his face a mask of frustration under the weak glow of a flickering street lamp. Malik slowed, his instincts screaming at him to keep going. This neighborhood taught you to mind your own business. It taught you that trouble often wore a nice coat. But his grandmother's voice echoed in his head, a constant refrain from his childhood. A man who won't help another in need ain't a man at all. He sighed, the sound lost in the storm, and steered his bike toward the stranded car. He leaned it against a graffitied wall and approached cautiously. "You need a hand, sir?" The old man looked up. His eyes were sharp, missing nothing. They took in Malik's drenched clothes, his skinny frame, the exhaustion etched onto his young face. He was drenched, clearly fighting a losing battle with the stubborn lug nuts. "The wrench keeps slipping," the man said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He didn't sound panicked, just annoyed, as if the storm itself had personally insulted him. Malik nodded. "They can be tricky when they're factory tight. Let me try." He took the wrench, positioning his body to use his weight. He grunted, his muscles straining. For a moment, nothing. Then with a painful screech of metal on metal, the first nut gave way. One by one he worked them loose, his hands raw and cold, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He worked in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic clang of the wrench and the drumming of the rain. When the spare was finally on, secure and tight, Malik stood up, wiping his greasy hands on his already ruined jeans. The old man watched him, his expression unreadable. He reached into his coat, pulling out a thick wallet. He extracted a crisp $100 bill. "For your trouble, son." Malik looked at the money, a small fortune that could solve a week's worth of problems. He could almost feel the weight of it, the relief it would bring. But his grandmother's words were there again, this time about pride. "You don't take money for decency, Malik." "Decency ain't for sale." He shook his head, pushing the man's hand away gently. "No, sir, I can't take that. You were in a jam, that's all." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. "A young man in a neighborhood like this, you don't want $100? Malik just shook his head again. "Get home safe," he said, and turned to grab his bike. He didn't see the look on the old man's face as he pedaled away, a look of profound, calculating surprise. He just felt the cold rain and the familiar ache of being poor, never knowing that in the back of that silent black Lincoln, a debt had just been recorded. A debt of honor that would be repaid 1,000 times over. Would you have stopped to help him? Or would you have just kept riding? Comment below. What would you have done? From the dry warmth of the Lincoln's leather interior, Leo Moretti watched the boy disappear into the rain-swept darkness. The $100 bill was still in his hand, feeling foreign and useless. For 60 years, money had been his language. It was a tool, a weapon, a solution. He could move mountains with it, silence enemies with it, buy loyalty with it. But the boy had refused it, not with arrogance, but with a simple, unshakable dignity. It was a gesture so out of place in this world of grasping hands and desperate compromises that it struck Leo with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just some old man. He was the unspoken king of this territory, a man whose name was whispered with fear and respect in every corner store and social club from here to the river. People bowed when he walked by. They scrambled to do his bidding for a fraction of what he'd just offered. And this kid, with holes in his sneakers and the weight of the world on his shoulders, had simply said no. His driver, a stoic man named Sal, who had been with him for 30 years, finally broke the silence from the front seat. "Everything all right, Mr. Moretti?" Leo didn't answer right away. He was replaying the scene in his mind. He'd seen the boy's hands, the cracked knuckles, the dirt under the nails, hands that knew hard work. He'd seen his tools on the back of that rickety bike, old, worn, but cared for. He saw the way the boy checked the spare tire one last time, making sure it was secure, taking pride in a job well done for a complete stranger. It was more than decency. It was character. It was the old way, the way his father had taught him, a code of conduct that seemed to be vanishing from the earth like an ancient language. In Leo's world, you sized a man up in moments. You looked for weakness, for a price. He had looked for the boy's price and found nothing but quiet strength. It was unsettling. It was impressive. "Get the name of the boy," Leo said finally, his voice low and firm. "I want to know everything about him. Where he lives, who he is, what troubles he has." Sal nodded, understanding immediately. This wasn't a request, it was an order with deep, unseen currents. "And Sal," Leo added as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, "be discreet. I want him watched. I want him protected. This boy, he has respect. In this world, a thing like that is rarer than gold. It must not be allowed to be broken by this city." He leaned back against the plush leather, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked window. He didn't know the boy's name yet, but he knew what he was. He was an echo of the past, a spark of honor in a world of ash. And Leo Moretti had always protected the things he valued. The boy had no idea that a silent, invisible shield had just descended around him, forged in the fires of a single, selfless act. 2 days later, the world was still grey and damp, but the rain had subsided to a miserable drizzle. Malik and his grandmother, Elena, were sharing a meager dinner of canned soup and crackers. The silence in their small apartment was thick, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator and Elena's occasional, shallow cough. The pharmacy receipt was still on the counter, a constant, taunting reminder of the $280 they didn't have for her next refill of medication. Malek pushed his soup around the bowl, the worry a bitter taste in his mouth. That's when they heard it, a soft, solid thump against their front door. They both froze. Unsolicited knocks were never good news in this building. It was usually the landlord, Mr. Henderson, coming to harass them about the rent, or worse, kids from the neighborhood looking for trouble. Malik motioned for his grandmother to stay quiet. He crept to the door, peering through the cracked peephole. The hallway was empty. He waited a full minute, his heart thumping against his ribs, before cautiously turning the deadbolt. He opened the door a crack and looked down. On their worn-out welcome mat sat 2 large cardboard boxes. There was no note, no delivery slip, nothing to indicate where they came from. Malik's first thought was that it was a mistake, a delivery for the wrong apartment. He dragged the heavy boxes inside, the scent of fresh food filling their small living room. He opened the first one, his breath catching in his throat. It was packed with groceries. Not just staples like rice and beans, but things they hadn't seen in years. A whole roasted chicken, still warm. Fresh vegetables, bright red peppers and crisp green lettuce. a loaf of artisan bread from an Italian bakery downtown, the kind he used to press his face against the window to smell as a kid. There was milk, eggs, real butter. The second box held more, bottles of orange juice, a bag of good coffee, and tucked in the corner, a thick wool blanket, softer than anything they owned. Elena came over, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Malik, where did this come from?" He shook his head, completely bewildered. "I have no idea, Grandma. Maybe a church, some kind of charity? But that didn't feel right. No church had ever just left food without a note or a knock. It felt too anonymous, too deliberate. They unpacked everything in a stunned silence, a bounty so extravagant it felt like a dream. But as Malik put the milk in the fridge, a sliver of unease crept into his mind. Charity felt one way. Mystery felt another. Good things didn't just happen out of the blue, not here, not to them. There was always a catch, always a price. He looked at the feast spread across their tiny kitchen counter, a gift from an invisible benefactor, and a new kind of worry began to settle in his gut, colder and heavier than the one about money. Who had sent this? And more importantly, what would they want in return? The landlord, Mr. Henderson, was a creature of habit and greed. He was a short, balding man with a sour disposition who prowled the hallways of his building like a troll guarding a dilapidated bridge. His favorite pastime was harassing tenants for rent, especially Malik and his grandmother. He knew they were struggling, and he seemed to derive a grim satisfaction from their anxiety. He appeared at their door the following week, a full 3 days before the rent was even due. "Just a friendly reminder," he said, his voice slick with false courtesy. "The first is coming up. I don't like excuses, Malik. I like cash." Malik stood in the doorway, his body tense. "We'll have it, Mr. Henderson. I just need a couple more days." Henderson's smile was thin and cruel. "Days cost extra, kid. You know the rules. Late fees. Maybe you and the old lady should think about finding a cheaper place, though I doubt you'll find one." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Malik's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to say something, to fight back, but he knew it was useless. Henderson owned them. He closed the door, leaning his forehead against the cool wood, the feeling of helplessness washing over him. Later that evening, Malik was taking out the trash when he saw something unusual. A dark sedan was parked across the street, the same model as the old man's car, but he couldn't be sure. 2 men in dark suits sat inside, their faces obscured by shadows. They weren't talking, they were just watching. Watching his building. A knot of paranoia tightened in Malik's stomach. Were they cops? He hadn't done anything wrong, but in this neighborhood, that didn't always matter. Then he saw Mr. Henderson exit the building. He scurried toward his own beat-up car, but before he could get in, the 2 men from the sedan got out. They moved with a quiet, unhurried confidence that was far more intimidating than any overt aggression. They didn't raise their voices, they simply flanked Henderson, one on each side, and began to speak. From this distance, Malik couldn't hear their words, only the low murmur of their voices. He saw Henderson's posture change. The landlord, usually so smug and belligerent, seemed to shrink. His shoulders hunched, his head bowed. He nodded rapidly, his face pale under the streetlight. The conversation lasted less than a minute. The 2 men gave Henderson a final, firm look, then got back into their car and drove away as silently as they had appeared. Henderson stood frozen on the sidewalk for a long moment, looking not angry, but terrified. Malik ducked back into the alleyway, his heart pounding. Who were those men? And what could they possibly have said to turn a predator like Henderson into frightened prey? The very next morning, there was a knock on the door. Malik braced himself, expecting Henderson to be back, perhaps even more emboldened after last night's strange encounter. He opened the door to find the landlord standing there, but it was a completely different man from the one he'd known. The usual sneer was gone, replaced by a strained, nervous smile. He was holding a small, grease-stained paper bag. "Morning, Malik," Henderson said, his voice oddly high-pitched. I brought you some donuts from the place down the street." "The good one?" Malik stared at him, then at the bag, utterly speechless. This was the man who complained about scuff marks on the hallway walls, who charged for every burned-out light bulb. "And listen," Henderson continued, avoiding eye contact, "about the rent. Don't you worry about it. There was a clerical error, an accounting mix-up. Turns out you're actually paid up through the end of next month." He pushed the bag of donuts into Malik's numb hand. "Yeah, my mistake. So, you and your grandmother you take care. Let me know if you need anything. A leak, a draft, anything at all." He practically scurried away down the hall, leaving Malik standing in the doorway holding a bag of warm pastries, his mind reeling. A clerical error? Paid up for 2 months? It was impossible. He knew exactly how far behind they were. It was a lie, a clumsy, transparent lie. But why? The image of the two men in dark suits flashed in his mind. The way they had cornered Henderson, the look of pure fear on the landlord's face. It all started to connect, but the picture it formed made no sense. Someone was pulling strings in his life, invisible threads of influence that could deliver groceries, pay his rent, and terrify a man like Henderson into submission. But who and why? This wasn't charity, this was power. The fear he'd felt before was now mixed with a profound sense of vertigo, as if the solid ground beneath his feet had suddenly turned to quicksand. He was no longer just a poor kid struggling to get by. He was something else, a piece in a game he didn't understand, being played by forces he couldn't see. The donut suddenly felt heavy in his hand, a peace offering from a defeated bully. But who had won the war on his behalf? And what would the victor demand of him when they finally decided to show their face? The feeling of being watched intensified over the next few weeks, but it began to feel different. The initial paranoia started to fade, replaced by a strange, unnerving sense of security. The dark sedan was a frequent, silent sentinel at the end of his block. Sometimes he'd see one of the men from that night standing across the street, leaning against a building, seemingly just observing the neighborhood's rhythm. But their eyes would always find him. They'd give a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, before turning their gaze away. It wasn't threatening, it was the opposite. It felt like he had invisible bodyguards. The neighborhood bullies who used to loiter on his corner suddenly found other places to hang out. The general sense of menace that always clung to the air in the Iron Triangle seemed to recede whenever he walked through it. It was as if a protective bubble had formed around him, a space that trouble instinctively knew to avoid. He started testing it in small ways. He'd walk home after dark, taking a route he normally would have avoided. He watched as a group of rowdy teenagers, known for shaking down people for loose change, saw him coming and immediately crossed the street, their laughter dying on their lips. He started noticing the small kindnesses from shopkeepers too. Mr. Giancarlo at the bakery, a man who was notoriously gruff, would slip an extra pastry into his bag with a wink. The butcher gave him a better cut of meat for the price of ground chuck. They all treated him with a new level of respect, their eyes holding a knowing look he couldn't decipher. He felt like he had been let in on a secret he didn't know himself. He was an outsider who had somehow been welcomed into the inner circle, but no one had told him the rules of membership. One afternoon, while sitting on the front stoop, he saw the old man from the rainy night. He was being driven by, sitting in the back of the same black Lincoln. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. The man gave him the same subtle nod the others did, a gesture of acknowledgement, of a shared understanding. And in that moment, Malik knew all of it. The groceries, the landlord, the invisible shield, it all came from him, the man with the flat tire. A profound chill went through Malik, a fear that was deeper than anything he'd felt before. This man wasn't just wealthy. He commanded a silent army. He changed the world with a nod. What kind of man possessed that kind of power? And what had Malik done to find himself caught in its invisible, inescapable web? The due date for his grandmother's medication arrived like a death sentence. The 2 months of prepaid rent had been a blessing, allowing him to save every dollar he earned from his part-time dishwashing job. But it wasn't enough, not even close. He counted the crumpled bills on his dresser, $112. The prescription cost nearly 3 times that. His grandmother had been coughing more lately, her breathing shallow and labored. He knew he couldn't let her miss a dose. He walked to Rossi's pharmacy with a stone in his stomach. Mr. Rossi was a fixture in the neighborhood, a kind-faced man who had known Malik since he was a baby. He knew their situation. Malik approached the counter, his hands trembling as he passed over the prescription bottle. I only have 100 of it right now, Mr. Rossi," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the floor. "But I get paid on Friday. I can bring you the rest. I promise." Mr. Rossi took the bottle but didn't look at the computer. He simply smiled, a warm, reassuring expression on his face. He turned and went into the back, returning a moment later with the bag of medication. "Here you go, Malik." Malik stared at him, confused. "But the money?" Mr. Rossi just pushed the bag across the counter toward him. "It's been taken care of," he said softly. Malik's blood ran cold. "Taken care of? By who? A church program?" Mr. Rossi's smile tightened slightly. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Some things are just handled. Don't ask questions, son. Just take care of your grandmother. She is a good woman." The words were kind, but the message was clear. Stop asking. This was the final piece of the puzzle, and it slotted into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just about watching him or making his life easier. This was an intimate intrusion. Whoever was behind this knew his grandmother was sick. They knew what medicine she needed. They knew his deepest, most private vulnerabilities. He took the bag, his fingers feeling numb. He walked out of the pharmacy and into the fading afternoon light, the world feeling tilted and unreal. He was grateful, so profoundly grateful he could barely breathe. But he was also terrified. The kindness was no longer a gentle rain, it was a flood, and he was being carried away by its current, unsure if it was taking him to safety or to a place where he would owe a debt so large he could never hope to repay it. Malik sat in his room that night, the bag from the pharmacy on his bed, a silent testament to the invisible forces now steering his life. He should have felt relief. He should have been happy. His grandmother had her medicine, the rent was paid, and the wolves of the world seemed to be keeping their distance. But instead of peace, a storm of conflict raged inside him. Every act of kindness felt like another link in a chain being wrapped around him. He had been raised to be self-reliant, to earn his way, to be proud of what little they had. Now he was living on the charity of a ghost, a powerful stranger whose motives were a complete mystery. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe the old man was just a wealthy eccentric, a philanthropist who preferred to work in secret. But he couldn't shake the image of Mr. Henderson's terrified face or the silent, watchful men in the dark sedan. This wasn't the work of a philanthropist. This felt different. It felt like the operations of an organization that worked in the shadows, one that didn't use contracts and lawyers but nods and whispers and fear. He felt a profound sense of being compromised. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had just changed a tire. Was that all it took to be bought? To have your life managed by someone else? He looked at his own hands, the same hands that had loosened the lug nuts on that car. They were his own, but he felt like they were no longer entirely under his control. He was indebted, and he didn't even know the name of his creditor. The code his grandmother had taught him was simple. You work hard, you are honest, you help others. But what did that code say about accepting help that comes from a place of shadows and intimidation? Was he a beneficiary or a pawn? The gratitude in his heart fought a bitter war with his pride. He was trapped. To refuse the help would be to condemn his grandmother to suffering. To accept it felt like surrendering a piece of his soul. He lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller and more lost than ever before. His quiet, difficult life had been his own. Now it was a shared property, and he didn't even know his landlord's name. The question echoed in the silence of his room, a question that had no easy answer. How do you pay back a debt to a man who seems to own the world? And what would happen if he ever decided to collect? The illusion of a peaceful life, even one managed by unseen hands, was shattered on a Tuesday night. Malik was walking home from his dishwashing job, the smell of grease and bleach still clinging to his clothes. He took a shortcut through a narrow alley, a path he'd walked 1,000 times. But tonight, it was different. 3 figures detached themselves from the shadows, blocking his path. He recognized them instantly. They were Vipers, a local street gang that thrived on petty crime and intimidation. Their leader, a wiry kid named Roach, who was a few years older than Malik, stepped forward, a smirk on his face. Well, look what we got here," Roach said, his voice dripping with menace. "Little Malik, working hard for his pennies." Malik's heart hammered in his chest, but he stood his ground. "I don't want any trouble, Roach." Roach laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "That's the thing, Malik. Trouble wants you. We've been watching you. You walk around here like you own the place now, like you're special. We think you need a reminder of who runs these streets." One of the others circled around behind him, cutting off his escape. They were closing in, a tight triangle of threat. Malik knew how this went. They'd take his wallet, maybe rough him up a little to make a point. It was the brutal, unwritten law of the neighborhood. "I don't have anything," Malik said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. "Let me go. We're not here for your money tonight," Roach said, his eyes gleaming with a cruel light. "We're recruiting. The Vipers could use a hard worker like you. Or you could pay a tax, a protection tax, to us, to make sure nothing bad happens to you or your sweet old grandma." The threat was no longer veiled. They were leveraging his one great weakness against him. Panic began to set in. He could fight, but it was 3 against 1. He could run, but they were faster. For the first time, he felt truly alone, beyond the reach of his invisible protectors. Where were they now? The sedan wasn't on the corner tonight. There were no men in suits watching from the shadows. There was just him, the Vipers, and the cold, damp bricks of the alley. Roach took another step forward, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small, wicked-looking knife, its blade catching the dim light. "So, what's it going to be, Malik? You with us, or are you against us?" Just as Roach took another step forward, the knife glinting menacingly, a new sound echoed in the narrow alley. It was the soft crunch of expensive leather shoes on loose gravel. 2 figures emerged from the mouth of the alley, moving out of the darkness and into the faint pool of light. It was them, the men from the sedan. They didn't run or shout. They simply walked forward with a calm, deliberate pace that was more terrifying than any war cry. Their suits were immaculate, their faces impassive. They looked like they were walking into a boardroom, not a back alley shakedown. The Vipers froze. Roach's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief, which quickly curdled into raw fear. He knew who these men were. Everyone in the Iron Triangle knew. They were Leo Moretti's men, his lieutenants. To see one was a warning. To see 2 was a verdict. One of the men, the taller of the 2, stopped a few feet from Roach. He didn't even glance at Malik. His eyes were locked on the gang leader. "Roach," he said, his voice a quiet, conversational baritone that carried an unmistakable weight of authority. "You and your friends are lost. This is not your alley. This is not your street." Roach swallowed hard, the knife suddenly looking like a child's toy in his hand. "We were just talking," he stammered. The second man, who had a faint scar above his eyebrow, stepped forward. He gently took the knife from Roach's unresisting fingers, folded it, and placed it in his own pocket, as if confiscating a pen. The "The conversation is over," he said. "The boy you're speaking with is a friend of ours, a friend of the family. That means this neighborhood is his home, and in our home, our friends walk safe. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The phrase, "friend of the family," hung in the air, electric and absolute. It wasn't just a statement, it was a redrawing of the map, a declaration of territory and protection that superseded any gang's claim. Roach and his crew looked like they had seen a ghost. They nodded frantically, their bravado completely evaporated. "Yeah," Roach whispered. "We understand. We're sorry. We didn't know." "Now you know," the first man said. "Go, and don't let us see you on this block again." The Vipers didn't need to be told twice. They practically fell over each other in their haste to get away, melting back into the shadows they'd come from. The alley was suddenly quiet. The two men turned to Malik. For the first time, they addressed him directly. The taller one spoke. "You are not to be troubled again," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. "Go home to your grandmother, son. You're safe." And with that, they turned and walked away, their footsteps echoing softly before disappearing completely. Malik stood there for a full minute, his body trembling with adrenaline. The invisible shield was no longer invisible, it was real. It had a voice, and it had just saved him. The fear and confusion were still there, but now, mixed in with it, was a dawning, terrifying sense of awe. He was protected by the most powerful men in the city, and he finally realized he had to find out why. Malik couldn't live with the questions anymore. The mystery was no longer a quiet hum in the background of his life. It was a screaming siren. He had to have answers. The next day, he skipped his shift at the restaurant and walked back to the one place where the invisible hand had shown itself so clearly. Rossi's pharmacy. Mr. Rossi was behind the counter, organizing pill bottles. He looked up and smiled when Malik entered, but the smile faltered when he saw the boy's determined expression. "Mr. Rossi," Malik began, his voice low but firm, "you have to tell me what's going on. The groceries, the rent, the men in the alley last night. I know you know something." The pharmacist's face became a careful, neutral mask. He polished the counter with a cloth, avoiding Malik's gaze. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Malik. You're safe. That's all that matters." "It's not all that matters," Malik insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "I can't live like this. I feel like a ghost in my own life. I need to know who is doing this." "Why me? It was the old man, wasn't it? The one with the flat tire?" At the mention of the old man, Mr. Rossi stopped polishing. He let out a long, slow sigh, the sigh of a man caught between loyalty and compassion. He looked at Malik, his eyes filled with a weary understanding. "Son, there are things in this neighborhood, old ways, that are better left unspoken. You come from a different world. You don't want to be a part of this one." "I think I'm already a part of it," Malik countered. "I just don't know the rules. Please, Mr. Rossi, I'm not asking for names. I just need to understand. I need to know why." The pharmacist wrestled with himself for a moment, his gaze darting toward the door as if expecting shadows to appear. He saw the genuine anguish in Malik's eyes, the turmoil of a good kid caught in something far bigger than himself. He finally relented, leaning closer across the counter. "Listen to me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "In our world, respect is the only currency that truly matters. More than money, more than power, it is everything. You showed respect when you had nothing to gain from it. You offered help without a price. You acted with honor. To a man who has spent his life searching for that quality, an act like that is not a small thing. It is a debt." "A debt for changing a tire?" Malik asked, incredulous. "It wasn't the tire," Mr. Rossi said, his eyes intense. "It was the character you showed while changing it. Go to Giancarlo's bakery on 8th Street. Ask for a cannoli. He will know what it means." He then straightened up, his professional mask back in place, and turned to help another customer. Malik was left standing there, his mind spinning. It was a cryptic clue, a breadcrumb on a trail he was terrified to follow. but it was the only trail he had. Giancarlo's bakery was a relic from another time. The smell of anise, almond, and baking bread hit Malik the moment he pushed open the door. A bell tinkling softly above him. The place was warm and inviting, a world away from the grey, cracked streets outside. Behind a long glass counter filled with pastries stood a large man with a flour-dusted apron and a magnificent white mustache. This had to be Giancarlo. The baker looked up, his eyes sharp and assessing. "What can I get for you, son?" he asked, his voice a friendly rumble. Malik's heart was pounding. This felt like a test. "I was told to ask for a cannoli," he said, the words feeling foolish on his tongue. Giancarlo's expression didn't change, but a flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. He nodded slowly. "I have a fresh batch. Wait here." He disappeared into the back for a moment, returning not with a pastry, but with 2 small glasses and a dusty bottle of dark liqueur. He poured a small amount into each glass, pushed one toward Malik, and leaned his large forearms on the counter. "You're the boy from the rain," Giancarlo said. It wasn't a question. The whole neighborhood is talking. The boy who said no to $100 and yes to helping a friend. Malik shook his head. "He was a stranger." "To you?" Giancarlo corrected gently. "But there are no strangers in a community. Only family and those who have not yet proven themselves. You, son, you proved yourself." He took a slow sip of his drink. "You must understand," he continued, his voice dropping low. "The people who are looking out for you, they are from the old country, or their parents were. They built this neighborhood with their bare hands. They believe in certain things: honor, loyalty, taking care of your own. When the world outside doesn't give you justice, you make your own. When the police don't protect you, you protect yourselves. And you protect the good people who live among you." He gestured around the bakery. "This place is safe because of them. Rossi's pharmacy is safe because of them. Your grandmother is safe because of them." He finally looked Malik straight in the eye. "They saw in you a boy who understands these things without ever being taught. A boy with a strong heart. In a world full of weak men, that is a rare thing. They are not putting you in their debt. They are investing in you. They are protecting what they value." Malik listened, a profound understanding dawning on him. This wasn't a criminal enterprise, not in the way he'd imagined. It was a tribe, a hidden, parallel society with its own laws and its own code of ethics. He hadn't been trapped. He had been adopted. "What do I do now?" Malik whispered. Giancarlo smiled, a genuine, warm expression. "You live, you work hard, you take care of your grandmother, you continue to be the good man you are. And tomorrow morning a car will be waiting for you at 8 o'clock. Don't be late. The man you helped wants to see you." The next morning, exactly at 8 o'clock, the black Lincoln sedan was waiting at his curb. It wasn't menacing, it was just there. The driver, the same stoic man named Sal, simply nodded as Malik approached and opened the back door for him. The ride was silent, taking him out of the familiar decay of the Iron Triangle and into a neighborhood of stately brick buildings and quiet tree-lined streets. They pulled up in front of a modest, unmarked social club. Inside it was quiet and dimly lit, smelling of cigar smoke and old wood. In a corner, sitting at a small table playing a game of solitaire, was the old man, Leo Moretti. He looked up as Malik approached and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Malik," he said, his voice the same gravelly rumble from that rainy night. "Thank you for coming." Malik sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He was face to face with the man who had turned his world upside down. "I wanted to thank you," Malik said, his voice barely a whisper, "for everything. The rent, my grandmother's medicine." Leo waved a dismissive hand, placing a red queen on a black king. "A debt is a debt. You honored me with your help. I honor you with mine. It is the old way." He looked up from his cards, his gaze piercing. "I had you looked into, Malik. I know about your father leaving. I know about your mother's passing. I know how you dropped out of the community college program to take care of Elena. You've had a hard life. You've had every reason to become bitter, to become a taker, but you didn't. You remained a giver. You stopped for a stranger in a storm." He paused, letting the words settle. "This city is full of sharks and wolves. They prey on good people like you and your grandmother. They bleed the neighborhoods dry. My family, we are the shepherds. We protect the flock, not for the law, not for the government, but for ourselves, for our community." He leaned forward, his voice softening. "This protection I've given you, it's not a leash. It's a foundation, but a foundation is useless if you don't build a house on it. The dishwashing job isn't enough for a boy with your spirit. I own a logistics company, a legitimate one. Trucks, warehouses. I want to offer you a job, a real job, learning the manifests, the roots, working your way up. It will be hard work, but it's honest. It will pay you enough to give your grandmother the care she deserves, and then some." Malik was stunned into silence. This wasn't a trap. It wasn't a trick to pull him into a life of crime. It was a door, a way out, a hand reaching down to pull him up. "Why?" Malik finally asked. "Why do all this for me?" Leo Moretti looked at him, and for the first time, Malik saw a hint of a smile on his face. "Because character is the only thing you can't buy. And I'm an old man, Malik. I like to invest in things that last." Malik accepted the job. He started the following Monday. The warehouse was vast and loud, a symphony of roaring trucks, beeping forklifts, and shouting men. It was worlds away from the quiet desperation of his apartment or the greasy steam of the restaurant kitchen. The work was demanding. He started at the bottom, sweeping floors and loading boxes, but he learned quickly. He memorized shipping codes, studied the complex dance of logistics, and earned the respect of the older men, not because of his invisible connection to the boss, but because he showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. He was no longer just Malik, the poor kid from the Iron Triangle. He was Malik, the guy who could get a last-minute shipment rerouted to Cleveland before dawn, the guy who always knew which container held what. He was building something. For the first time in his life, he had a future that wasn't just a fantasy, but a tangible path stretching out before him. The money was steady and good. He was able to afford not only his grandmother's medication, but also better food, a new heater for the apartment, and small comforts that had been unthinkable just months ago. He even started taking online classes again at night, studying business management. The change in his grandmother was the most profound reward. With proper care and less stress, the color returned to her cheeks. The constant, shallow cough subsided. She would watch him get ready for work in the morning, a deep, quiet pride in her eyes. The invisible shield around him remained. He never saw the vipers again. Mr. Henderson would nod to him respectfully in the hallway and ask about his grandmother's health. He understood the code now. It wasn't about crime or violence. Not for him. It was a parallel system of support, a tribe that operated on its own ancient rules of loyalty and reciprocity. He rarely saw Leo Moretti, but he felt his presence. It was in the steady paycheck, the safe streets, the quiet respect of the men around him. He had been given a hand up, not a handout, and the distinction was everything. He was earning his own way, but on a path that had been cleared for him by a single act of kindness on a stormy night. He was finally free from the constant worry of survival, and in its place, a new feeling was taking root, a deep, abiding sense of purpose. 6 months later, Malik was driving home from work. He wasn't on his old rickety bike anymore. He was in a modest, reliable used car he'd bought with his own savings. It was late, and a familiar heavy rain was beginning to fall, slicking the streets of the Iron Triangle with a dark sheen. As he turned onto his block, the beams of his headlights cut through the downpour and landed on a familiar scene. A small, sputtering hatchback was pulled over on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking in a frantic, lonely rhythm. A young woman stood beside it, soaked to the bone, staring helplessly at a completely flat tire. For a fleeting moment, the memory of that night washed over him. The cold, the exhaustion, the old man in the tailored coat. He could keep driving. He was tired. It was late. It wasn't his problem, but his grandmother's voice was still there, as clear as ever. A man who won't help another in need ain't a man at all. He smiled. He pulled his car over, flicked on his own hazard lights, and grabbed the heavy-duty jack and tire iron he now kept in his trunk. He got out of the car, the cold rain hitting his face, and walked toward the stranded woman. "You need a hand?" he asked, his voice calm and steady above the storm. The young woman looked up, her face a mixture of relief and surprise. He didn't know her. She had no idea who he was or what forces had shaped his past few months. To her, he was just a kind stranger stopping to help on a miserable night. As he knelt down and began to loosen the first lug nut, he wasn't thinking about Leo Moretti or debts of honor. He was just a man helping someone in a jam. He had learned that the most valuable currency wasn't money and it wasn't power. It was the simple human decision to stop when everyone else keeps going. The kindness he had been shown was not a debt to be repaid to one man. It was a gift to be paid forward to the world, one small act at a time. The circle was now complete. That one decision to help a stranger in the rain didn't just change Malik's life. It revealed a hidden world of loyalty and honor he never knew existed. It shows that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can echo in the most unexpected ways. Have you ever experienced a moment where a simple gesture of goodwill led to something extraordinary? Share your story in the comments below. We all have the power to change someone's world, often when we least expect it. For more stories that uncover the hidden heart in the world around us, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You never know whose life you might touch next.